What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Must start and avoid running backs for week one. Guys, week one is almost here, so we're done with the off-season content. We're transitioning right into week one, and we'll be taking a look at the running back position today. I'll be making this video every week, and it's going to focus more on flex plays, so we're not going to go over the obvious top 10 players. You're starting them every week, doesn't really matter but the matchup, and you're not starting guys in the 50s. We're going to focus on that middle chunk where you're actually needing to make decisions between players. I can't go over every matchup though, obviously, so if your start-sit question does not get answered, then just look at my rankings at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That will answer any question you have. So we'll start things off today as usual with the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was among running backs to score at least 10 touchdowns last season. All but one of them had at least 10 expected touchdowns. But one of them had fewer than 5 expected touchdowns. So who was the player that got super lucky? The answer was Raheem Mostert, and Mets fan was the first to get that one correct. Today's stat, among tight ends with at least 40 targets last season, who had the highest touchdown rate? So let's start off with running backs, and we're going to start off with starts. So we're going to have 3 situations here. I believe you should be starting these running backs, and then we'll transition into the sits. So first up, I would be starting Jonathan Taylor. You guys know I love Taylor, so you probably knew I was going to say start him, but I'd be starting him in the flex, unless you got him as, say, your running back 4, and maybe the other 3 running backs all also have fantastic matchups, because if you drafted a little bit ago, maybe you did end up getting him in the 6th round. Pretty unlikely. I'd say if you drafted recently, he's probably more like your running back 2 or your running back 3, in which case I would start him. The Colts are currently 7.5 point favorites, implied to score just over 26 points. The Jaguars' run defense was dreadful last season, so there's no reason to think that it's all of a sudden going to be elite. They're probably going to be very bad this season as well, especially considering for this game, the Colts have a top 3 offensive line. So when you've got a team that was just crushed on the ground last season, didn't do much to improve it, and they're going up against really good running backs and a really good offensive line, that's pretty frightening if you're the Jaguars. The most likely game flow here is that the Colts are able to build a lead by halftime, maybe not by the end of the first quarter. You know, there's always a lot of variance in football, but I think by halftime, the Colts should have built a lead, meaning they'll be able to maintain that lead over the second half, featuring their ground game. That's not to say Rivers and T.Y. Hilton can't have a good game. I expect that they are part of the reason why they build that lead, and I really think T.Y. can hit a long touchdown in this one. But I expect the volume for the running backs to be there in this one. There is a little bit of risk here since we don't know exactly what the split is going to be to start the season between Taylor and Mack, but this is one of the best matchups you can ask for. So I'd imagine at worst, Taylor's gonna see 10 to 12 carries with a little bit of involvement in the receiving game as well in designed plays to get him the ball, probably on screen passes. And there's a decent chance of him making it into the end zone, and he could absolutely go for 102 scores. Remember, they're going to score probably in the upper 20s to low 30s in points this week, and since they're going to be running the ball a lot of those points could come on the ground. And so if we see a game where they have 3 running back touchdowns, we could see Taylor score twice and Mack score once, and you shouldn't be surprised by that. I have Taylor in my 14-team full PPR league, and I will be playing him as my running back 2, and I do feel confident enough in saying that you guys should also play him at the 2. It's a 14-team league, so maybe he's more your flex. But like I'm going to talk about a few times in this video, and a ton of times this season, I shoot for upside in the flex. I'm cool taking on a little bit of risk if it's giving me that ceiling, and Taylor gives you that ceiling even in a full PPR league, like I said. So I'd be starting him in any format. As for Mack, you probably don't need to, right? Where you got Mack, it's very unlikely that you have to start him as a running back 2 of the flex. So if you were someone who took him, I'd just wait and see what the split's going to be, because you don't have to, and there's no reason to. If you were somehow forced to, you're in a 16-team league, or you went RB0 and you have him, honestly, it's not the worst play in the world, because like I said, I think they're going to do really well on the ground, and Mack could also score as well. Rams running backs up next. Not saying you should start every Rams running back, but I want to go over this backfield in general because I know some of you took Henderson, and I know a lot of you took Akers, and Akers is right in that range where a lot of you are like, ooh, do I play him in the flex? Well, what's happening with Henderson? We'll talk about that. So all of this decision basically does come down to Henderson. He is obviously going to try and play in the game. They want him to be healthy enough to play. Will he be? We can't know. As of recording this video, I do not know if Henderson is going to play through his hamstring injury or if they're going to bench him to start the season. And his status is going to impact the rest of the backfield. So I'll break down both potential outcomes. Assuming that Henderson is out, he's declared out prior to, I guess, Sunday morning. I think this is a 4:25 or 4:15 game or 4:05, whatever the 4 o'clock slot is this week. So it's possible you don't know by 1, which would be unfortunate. But let's just say we know he's out. I would play Akers as a running back too. That might feel risky, but I expect this game to shoot out, and I expect the Rams running backs to account for at least one of the touchdowns. I don't think it's as likely that the Rams running backs score multiple as it is with the Colts. I think the Colts are pretty likely to score a lot on the ground. I don't think it's as likely with the Rams, but I think at least one of the touchdowns will come on the ground for the Rams. The game has a 52-point total and is projected to be close, so it shouldn't surprise anyone if both these teams finish in the upper 20s to the low 30s here. This could be a really good game. It's going to be a great one to watch. Dallas isn't a great defense, but their weakness is more in the secondary. They lost 2 key corners, and they didn't do really that much to replace them. But their defensive line is solid. And given that the Rams' offensive line is pretty trash, I'm not expecting the Rams to try and win this game on the ground. So I think they're going to throw a lot, and I don't think they're going to have that much success when they run it. The biggest thing for me here is touchdown equity mixed with opportunity. The Rams are still going to run the ball, right? Even though I don't think they're going to have that much success, they're still going to run it. And they're going to use their running backs in the receiving game. And given that Brown is an absolute zero in that area of the game, Akers could find himself posting a really solid fantasy stat line, even if the rushing total isn't that high. So if Henderson's out, I really do think I'd be starting Akers. Probably from where you got him is more of a flex play, but since he'd be the top guy, I know they're going to say Malcolm Brown's going to have a role. I really think Akers would get the majority of the touches. Maybe not. Let's say there are 25 touches for the running backs. I don't think it's going to be split 13 and 12. I think that Akers probably gets 60 to 65% of that work, and I think under that split, he'd be a good guy to start because I think the touchdown equity, the receiving upside is all there. Assuming that Henderson is in, I would want to figure out what he actually is. Is he active or is he active, right? Is he going to be involved as much as he usually is, or is it going to be we're going to activate him in case something happens to these running backs, but he's not going to play? We will probably get that indication from beat reporters, but I would want to try and figure that out. I can't know right now what's going to happen, but we'll go over both, I guess. So let's say he's active but not going to play. Well, you just pretend he's out, right? That's not a very difficult one, and we're going with what we did before. We're starting Akers. Under no circumstance we're really starting Brown, but you probably don't even know him. If it seems like he's good to go, I'd probably just shy away from this backfield in general, honestly, because at that point, they're probably more splitting between 3 guys. And so if we take that, 25 touches we talked about before, well, now it might be 10, 10, and 5. And then it's really, really thin, even if we expect points to be scored for touchdowns. Now it's now there's 3 dudes who could get touchdowns, and it's a lot tougher. So I would say if Henderson's going to play and we think he's actually going to have a role, I'd probably just start no one, see what happens. You probably don't need to start Akers unless you're in a pretty deep format, and so I think you will still be fine. Hopefully you can slot in a wide receiver there, a different running back, and we can just reevaluate in week 2. The last start we're going to go over today is Antonio Gibson, and this is going to be a ton of people's most difficult decision for week 1 as far as these flex plays. As of this last weekend, I've had Gibson as a 6th-round pick, but I've seen him go anywhere from the 13th round into the 4th round. Like, I've been in drafts where both of those have occurred this past weekend. So this isn't like a month ago and a day ago. In the past few days, I've seen him go in the 13th and in the 4th. So there's a very wide range of spots where he took him. And that's going to impact your decision. Because if you got him in the 13th, we were in a league where we got him in the 13th, and the running backs are Kamara and Mixon. Well, now there's no need to start Gibson because you're obviously starting those two. But if you took him in the 6th round, well, then you might need to because you might not have other running backs so you can start over him. Ultimately, these decisions always come down to who else you have, right? So my biggest recommendation is just look at my rankings. I can tell you he's ranked in the 20s, but that could be a start for some people and avoid for others. It just depends. What else do you have? So look at my rankings, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But as for Gibson this week, he's taking on the Eagles, and Washington is 6-point home underdogs, projected to score 18.5. So for most running backs, you look at that and you're like, no. If you've got a 6-point home dog and you're projected to score 18.5 points on offense, that is not a good situation for the running backs. But Gibson is different, right? Game script doesn't really matter as much for him since he gets a ton of his value from targets, which we know are worth 2.73 carries. So if he's getting his work in that area, and that area doesn't even matter what the score is. if they're up 10 or down 10, he's still getting targets. So regardless, and honestly, you'd almost prefer him be down and trying to catch up. Obviously, I want to talk about that for a second. You would prefer Gibson be down trying to catch up, but have them also score points. So you want it to be like 24 to 31, and they're trying to catch up. You don't want it to be 31 to 0, because then it's like, yeah, he's trying to catch up, but they're not moving the ball, they're not scoring points, so this is dreadful, right? You want them to be trailing, but be in a high-scoring game. So the 18.5 is still definitely a negative. You don't want that for any players because the scoring chances will be lower. Also, the Eagles historically don't really allow that many rush attempts, but again, that matters less for Gibson because we're not expecting him to get that many rush attempts anyways. I consider Gibson a low-end running back 2 this week, but an extremely high upside one. And like I said to start this video, I always lean upside. So if you have a player with a similar projection to Gibson, I don't know what it is on sites. I'm guessing it's in that 11 to 13 range, right? If you've got multiple players with that exact projection, I'd lean Gibson, if that other player doesn't also have upside. Like if that other player is Will Fuller, well, now they both have upside. Now you need to make a decision. But if it's a low upside player that has the same projection as Gibson, well, I want those big weeks because those are worth more than the duds. So I would prefer starting Gibson, who could definitely score 6 or 7 points, but could also score 30. And you can't say that about very many players. So I have him as low end 2. I think he's a great player to play in your flex spot this week. And I think he's an epic start in your second flex spot, because I know a lot of you have leagues like that. That's where I'd really like him, starting as like your 4th running back, or your, 3rd running back if you have 3 running backs and 3 receivers. That's where I'd really like him, and I think that's where you can capitalize on his upside the most. Moving on to avoid, though, we've got the Tampa Bay backfield in general. I don't know for sure which 3 running backs will be active, but we can feel pretty confident in saying Fournette and Ronald Jones will be 2 of them. I don't know what they'll do between McKissick and Love, but it seems like Jones and Fournette would be the 2, unless this could happen. We get some surprise, hey, Fournette came here a week ago, he's not ready yet, but we're going to know, so it's honestly not that big of an issue. Whatever ends up happening, just look at it and see how the rankings change. But under the assumption that Fournette and Jones are just 2 of the active dudes, we can feel pretty good saying that one of them is not going to get the majority of the work. Arians has come out and said that Jones is the guy, but that's not going to happen long term, and I would be shocked if Jones comes out there and he's just a feature back in week 1. I think within the next month, Fournette will take more and more work. For week 1, though, I don't expect either guy to be featured. I don't expect Jones to. I don't expect Fournette to. So given that they're playing the Saints And this game does have a 49.5 point total, with the Saints being 3.5 point home favorites. You look at that and you say, well, there's points, right? The problem is, if we're expecting this backfield to split the touches, right, and we see Fournette probably maxing out at like 12 carries and maxing out at like 2 or 3 targets, that's not that much upside. He needs multiple touchdowns to pay off, because the Saints are a pretty good defense, right? And they're especially good against the ground game. So sure, the total is high and they might score a lot of points, but that doesn't necessarily mean the ground game is going to do anything. The total is high because the quarterbacks are good and the receiving options are good, and they're expecting a lot of passes. They're expecting a lot of production through the air, not on the ground. Last season, these teams played 2 times and they combined for 55 and 51 points. And so that's kind of what we expect to happen this time around as well. Yet on the Bucs, no one ever went over 35 rushing yards in either game, and Winston actually led the team in rushing yards in one game with just 23. So again, they can score a ton of points, but have it all come through the air and just no production on the ground. So it doesn't mean anything for these running backs. So personally, I would stay away from Fournette and Jones in any format. Even if you're desperate, you gotta listen to beat reporters on Sunday. There's gonna be some reports as to what they expect the split to be, but in general, if you're not willing to just be there Sunday morning looking through beat reporters, what they're saying, different articles, then avoid. Try and find someone else, and I would be very surprised if you don't have a better option this week, because you probably didn't take them that early, and I'd honestly be pretty surprised if any of you have Fournette in general if you watch our content. So, Kareem Hunt, up next. You guys know I love Kareem Hunt this season. In PPR leagues, he outscored Chubb in 6 out of 8 weeks after returning last season. He should be more involved this year. The offense, I expect to be better this season as well. And his upside is nuts if Chubb goes down. But there are still some unknowns, and this is not a good matchup. The Browns play the Ravens, and they're only projected to score 20.25 points. That doesn't mean they can't go for 30 plus. They absolutely could, but it means their most likely outcome is between like 17 and 24. Because of this, Hunt has less of a chance to score than he will in most weeks moving forward, and that means also that he's kind of got to get there on volume, and he's not a volume player. Like, we still kind of expect him to be around 5 to 6 targets, 5 to 6 carries each week. And in full PPR, he can have a good week if he converts like all of those targets, or at least most of those targets. But it means most week he's probably going to need a touchdown to truly pay off. And so there's a lot of risk in this game that he has like 20 rushing yards, maybe 4 receptions for 35 yards and no score, which is only 7.5 points in half PPR. And that would be fine, I guess, in your flex, your second flex. But ideally, you're looking for a little bit more upside. Again, I don't think the volume's going to be that high. I don't think they're going to score many points, which means given that he's probably like 4th or 5th in line for touchdowns, I don't see it. So I don't think that I would be playing him, especially because this would be your flex spot. And again, I want upside in the flex, and I don't see his upside this week. The last one we'll go over is Denver, and this is a pretty tough one. The latest reports seem to indicate a close to like 50-50 split between Gordon and Lindsey, and that's a problem for us because it means that both of them are pretty touchdown reliant, right? I mean, this isn't an offense where we're expecting like 40 carries, so if they're splitting the work and, this isn't a high total game, it's got a 41 over-under, it's concerning being touchdown reliant in what is, I think, the lowest total game on the week, or at least one of the bottom 3 lowest totals on the week. I still think the split's going to be closer to 60-40 than 50-50. I can't imagine that Denver would pay Melvin Gordon, who's a very talented running back. Like, it's not like he's some scrub. They paid him because he deserved that money, and just like still not make him the touch leader. That wouldn't make too much sense to me. The decision on starting Lindsey is pretty easy. You won't need to. There's no way you drafted Lindsey and you're in a spot where you have to start him. I'd be shocked, honestly, if you had better options than if you didn't have better options than Lindsey. But for Gordon, I mean, right now I have him in like the low to mid 20s for running backs, which means that you could start him as running back 2 as your flex option. But I think if you have better options, then I would probably go that direction. The Titans were 10th in rush efficiency on defense last season, and they got even better. Plus, they're going to try and run the ball a ton, which is going to limit the play upside of Denver. And when you add in the low total and the general uncertainty in exactly what this split's going to look like, it could definitely lead to a disappointing week for Gordon. Now, I understand if you just have to start him because of where you took him. You probably took him relatively early. So it is fine if you just need to. I just much prefer a wide receiver, I think, over Melvin Gordon in the flex spot. And if you have to start running back, I hope that you have a better option. If you don't, though, it's fine. It's not going to kill you. I don't think he's going to have that great of a week. So those are my must start and avoid running backs for week 1. If you have any start sit questions that were not answered in this video, you can look at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? Thanks for watching.